All right. I'm David Agranoff. I'm author of Punk Rock Ghost Story and the Vegan Revolution with Zombies. I have over 600, close to 700 book reviews on my blog, Postcards from a Dying World. I'm here joined by Marvin Vernon, who's also a critic, horror fiction, science fiction blogger and reviewer. And I'm going to apologize in advance if there's dog or kitchen sounds, because just this is the time when we could get together to talk about our best reads of 2017. Marvin, how many books did you read this year?
I read 26 and working on 26. I'm sorry. I read 86 and I'm working on 87. I don't think I'll go any farther than that this year.
Okay, you got me by a few books. So we are establishing that we are well-read in the genre, and we both read a lot of books from this year. I put a focus on the second half of the year on reading books from 2017, and the attempt to do that was very deliberate for me, because I used to not read so many from in the year. So anyways, we're going to go through your top 10 first, but we're going to talk about a couple of your honorable mentions first. You have a couple honorable mentions you want to that didn't quite make your top 10, but books you highly recommend.
Okay, I've only got mentioned a couple, but there were actually six books that I rated 5 stars this year that did not make the top 10. I'll mention 2 of them that I thought were very good and people should go out of the way to find. The first one is C.V. Hunt, Home is Where the Horror Is. And I especially like it because if you read C.V. Hunt, she really, she's very dark writer, probably one of the darkest writers I know. And her book kind of go beyond horror. They're more very essential in some ways. But Home is Where the Horror Is basically a straight horror novel.
Yeah, I've been meaning to pick up a C.V. Hunt book because I've heard interviews with her and she seems like she would write stuff up my alley.
Yeah, she is very heavy on body horror. A lot of erotic, horror erotic. But this one I like because it was pretty much straight horror.
Got it.
The second one, I think I'll mention a fun one. Cavern of the Damned by Russell R. James.
I never heard of that one.
What's that? You haven't read that?
I haven't heard of it.
Oh, yeah. Russell R. James writes some pretty good straight horror novels. He liked those I would call in the adventure style, people going into strange areas. And this one is about a cave that is right out of the B horror movie from the 50s and 60s. Giant insects, big Gila monsters, all that sort of thing. And there's a mild love interest going on. It was like reading a B movie. I mean, so I really recommend it to those who just like to have a lot of fun in their reading.
All right, so number 10 on your list is one that we have talked at length about, and you can find on YouTube our discussion more in depth of your number 10 book. So number 10 is?
Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey.
That's right. This is the sequel to The Girl with All the Gifts. I did really like this book. It didn't quite make my list, but I did not enjoy it quite as much as The Girl with All the Gifts. And it made your list because?
Well, number 10 is always hard for me because I got one room or one more book, and there's so many good books I could fit there. I did not read The Girl with All the Gifts, so this was although I saw the movie, so this one was probably more of a revelation to me. And I really liked the way it dealt with the post-apocalypse theme, if you could call them zombies. I thought it was a very original book for that subgenre.
Right. All right. So you're number 9.
Secrets of the Weird by Chad Stroup.
Strout.
And gosh, Anyhow, how do you say that last name?
Stroup.
Schraub. Thank you. Sorry, Jad. uh, Anyhow, it's Secret of the Weird. I think you have made your list too, but we'll go and get onto that.
I'll talk about it when we do my list. But
yeah.
But what did you like about Secrets of the Weird?
Secret of the Weird was really interesting because it had a fictional city, kind of the worst part of a city, basically, where the punks and the addicts hang out, and it was it made its own little world of a city, and it was more to me like a portrait or a land. I use the term portrait of landscape for it. That is basically painting a picture of an area, and it did it very well. That is why I really liked it. I thought
that's interesting because
make you experience an area.
Yeah, that's interesting because there is very good world building in that book, but I didn't. That's not really what occurred to me originally. So for me personally, but yeah, the world building is very good.
City building in this case.
City building, yes. Well, it's the world of the novel. So number 8.
The Fourth Monkey by J.D. Barker.
Mm-hmm.
And The Fourth Monkey is basically a serial killer novel. Essentially, it's about detectives who are trying to find a rather vicious serial killer. And normally, I get a little tired of those novels. This one really kept my interest. Main reason is because it had a backstory that was important, that had the actual plot going on, that really put you into the mind of the killer.
I have not heard of that one, so that is going on my list. Okay, now this is gonna get a little uncomfortable here for a second. Your number
for you, not for me.
Yeah, your number 7 best novel of 2017 is.
It's Flesh Trade by somebody called David Agranoff and Edward Morris.
Well, now here, one of the reasons why it's uncomfortable is you spelled my name wrong on your blog.
Did I?
Yeah, you put the R before the G, which a lot of people do, but it's Agranoff, not. So, yes. But yeah, it is my book, so partially.
Okay.
Yeah. So Flesh Trade is a novel that I co-wrote with Portland author Edward Morris, and you put it on your list because.
Well, I would call it. I believe it's the best science fiction novel I read this year. Pretty much that. I don't read as much science fiction that I used to, but this one had plenty of influence from a number of writers. Phil K. Dick. I'm trying to think of some others offhand, but essentially it's a science fiction adventure novel. A lot of kind of hardcore on the action. It's something that really kept my interest throughout. And a lot of science fiction doesn't anymore because it doesn't feel fresh. And this felt fresh.
Well, I appreciate that, Marvin. Yeah.
I apologize for misspelling your name, though, and missaying your name when I know better.
Right. Well, yeah. I'm really proud of that book, and I'm really proud to be on your list because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't respect your opinion. I'm sure Ed feels the same way. I don't know if Ed and I will get the chance to work together again, but it's more likely the more people go out and support that book. So I hope that they do. Now, I might quibble with you saying that it's the best science fiction novel that you read in the year when your number 6 novel could arguably be considered science fiction. Your number 6 best novel of 2017 is?
Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin R. Curran.
Right.
And I don't consider science fiction. I think it's more horror Lovecraftian.
Oh, okay. Well, It
So,
does have a lot to do with planet Pluto or the not planet Pluto, um, and the flyby from New Horizon, and so that I would say that there are some science fictional elements there, but it's on my list, so I'll talk about it more when I get there.
sorry.
But yeah, what did you like about Agents of Dreamland?
It is Dreamland is one of the best Lovecraftian style novels that I have read in a long time. It's very short. I think if it's over 100 pages, I'd be surprised. I can't remember right now. But it really had that feel to it, kind of that eerie Lovecraftian feel. I don't know how to really state anything else because it's rather unique as far as it goes. There's a strained organization. There's a cult involved. It's one of those you really got to read, I think.
Yeah, it's on my list, so I'll talk more about it when I get there. Excuse me. Your number 5 best novel of 2017 is
Bone White by Ronald Malfi. And that is a novel that I do highly recommend. First book I read by him. Essentially, real fast on the plot, the brother of a man who had disappeared go find out about some killing taking place in this small town. I think it's up in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
And he goes there. He goes there to find out if it's his brother that is one of those who died. From there, we get a portrayal of a very odd town, some very unusual people and situations involved. I don't want to get too much about it because one of those I think is best when you don't really know much about it.
Yeah, and this is one I can talk more about during your section because it's not on my top 10. However, I did like Bone White a lot, and I specifically read it because of your recommendation and because of your review on your blog. And at the time, you said it was I think you said it was the best book you'd read so far in the year, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I read it. And I've not read Ronald Malfi before, but I will say that the use of setting was great. It was very classical horror. It felt like it could have been a lost book from like the run of 80s horror, paperbacks. The supernatural elements that were there just worked really well. I like Bone White a lot. It was very good. All right. So number 4 on your best novels of 2017 is
Liquid Status by Bradley Sands. And that novel is you said that Bone White was the best novel I read of the three of the 4 I put higher than that. Yeah, number 3 and number 4 I read before, but they really stuck with me. And Liquid Status is just basically a psychedelic experience reading. There's very little sense to it. If you ever read Bradley Sands, you know exactly what I mean.
I have. I've also gone on long walks to get burritos with him. So Bradley's an interesting cat.
Yes, and this one really impressed me because he's usually rather humorous, and this one is really serious. And he uses his kind of bizarro mind and surrealistic mind to really go farther than I think he had ever done before. Because this, like I said, is a serious novel. There's something going on. What it is, you may not figure it out, but it really is worth reading. It really impressed me.
That does not sound like a typical Bradley Sands, and I'm very interested. Not that I don't. I mean, I loved It Came From Below the Belt, for example. His totally bizarro sci-fi novel. I like that a lot, and his action hero one, Rico Slade Saves the World. is hilarious.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Bradley writing serious, I am interested.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sticking with Bizarro. Your number 3 best novel 2017 is
Nails by M.P. Johnson, who is usually considered a Bizarro writer, but this is not. Nails is about a man who goes to basically on vacation to a place far away, basically Los Angeles, from where he rarely lived, so he can feel comfortable dressing like a woman, basically being a woman. Nail referred to as acrylic nails, which has some symbolism in the novel. And this is far from anything he'd written. Very personal story.
She.
Yes, I got to remember to do that. And it is definitely something that people should read. And as I told Emma, I'm hoping she writes a very similar thing to it that is much longer, because now it was simply too short.
Well, that's, it's on my list. I just hadn't gotten to it, and I feel like a bad friend. Emma has is known for writing Bizarro, but has published quite a bit of horror over the years. And in fact, the collection that I edited, the Vault of Punk Horror, had a just absolutely amazing, one of the best horror short stories we had in that collection, Gone to Seed, was an early M.P. Johnson story. So, Emma has this in her. Horror is definitely a part of her game. So, that's definitely high on my list of. I can't believe I didn't get to it already, but it's definitely on my list. So, Number 2.
Okay. In the Valley of the Sun by Andy Davison. And I described this as being a vampire novel written by Larry McMurtry or Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, that's the best way I could describe it.
I agree with that assessment. I'll talk about it more because it's on my list as well. But
yes, this is one of the horror novels that really transcends horror. I mean, it really is about environment. It's about time. It's about relationships and family. And yeah, all horror novels do write about this. But when they combine so well in a novel like this, it really people should really pay attention.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Your number 1 best novel of 2017 is?
Drumroll. Final Girls by Riley Sager. And this is a very auspicious, I believe it's first novel. And Final Girls, the title for most of you horror readers or horror movie viewers should be obvious. It's about the girl that survives a mass murder, basically. And in this case, it is about 3 of them who are trying to survive or trying to cope after the event happens. All of a sudden, I'm going to mention this, one of them ends up committing suicide and the other 2 meet each other for the first time. And that is basically where the novel begins. Lots of red herrings, lots of twists. It's essentially a suspense thriller with very heavy horror elements. The ending just surprised me, and it is one of the most intriguing and can't put down books I've read in years. So I cannot recommend this higher.
Yeah, I know you were after me all year to read it, and
I never did.
I never did. I don't know why. Perhaps something about. I mean, the title might have kind of scared me away a little bit, but just the use of term girls for grown adult women, just something it bothers me. So that may have kept me away a little bit, but I definitely will read it. It's your number one. I'm gonna check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts on your top 10 for 2017?
Well, I should mention that when I'm doing best novel of 2017, I don't necessarily make it a horror novel list. And so there are a couple books on here, and most obvious Nails, which isn't even horror. And I'm not sure if Letstrade can be considered horror, but it's science fiction though.
Right.
So
I just said top reads for us. So.
Horror novels. But this year, a lot of horror novels made my list.
Right. Very true. All right, hold on. So you got my list in front of you?
Sorry about that. I'm bringing it up.
All right.
There it is. Okay, yes, I do.
All right, so you're going to take over the prompting.
Okay, and we'll start with number 10, which is...
Whoa. Honorable mentions. Yes, honorable mentions, sorry.
Honorable mentions, yes. What are your honorable mentions that you would like to bring to our attention?
Well, probably the best book I read that didn't make my list is The Force by Don Winslow. And if I'm honest, it didn't make my list partially because he's a number one bestseller and doesn't really need my prompting. But The Force is one of the best crime novels I've pretty much ever read. It's basically, I know Stephen King called it The Godfather with cops, but it's about the system and corruption in New York City, and it basically shines a really strong light on like how messed up the whole justice system is. So I loved The Force by Don Winslow.
Not a book I read. I believe I have not read anything by Don Winslow.
Yeah, you should read. You should.
Statement about it.
Yeah, he's great. His cartel books are really good too. I'm going to be reading some of those this year. I'm going to briefly just say that I really enjoyed Feral by B.K. Evanson and James DeMonico, which we did an audio review of. But I'm not going to really go into much of that. But I read one of the books came out this year, but the first book didn't. But the first two books in the Benti trilogy by Nadia Okafor, just amazing Afrocentric science fiction. Really dug that. And then I did want to give props to the best short story that I read all year, which was Failsafe by Philip Frakazi, which is one of the best horror short stories I've read in a long time. That story just hit me like a ton of bricks. So, love that story. All right, so now my top 10 list.
Yes, and now your top 10 pick is.
My number 10 pick for 2017 is Agents of Dreamlands by Caitlin R. Kiernan, which was on your list. Now, I really love this. Is in the Tor novella series, and it's probably the best Lovecraftian I've read in a long time. I'll agree with you on that. And what is really phenomenal about Agents of Dreamland is that it pays homage to one of a classic Lovecraftian story and updates it and matches it with modern science. The story was about Pluto. I'm brain farting the name of the original story, but it updates it with the current science, and I just thought that was really neat. So, Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin R. Kiernan, really excellent book. So, yeah.
Okay. So, I pretty much said what I thought on it. So we'll move to number 9, which is?
The Voices of Martyrs by Maurice Broaddus, and this is a short story collection. And I read it during a month when I was specifically trying to read a few more new releases by authors of color. I believe this may have technically been released in 2016 in a hardcover edition, but I think the paperback came out in 2017. Anyways, Maurice Broaddus is from my home state of Indiana. He's just a really super nice guy, awesome, but he is a powerhouse writer. And so this collection has horror, science fiction, surrealism, Afrocentric type stories. It has steampunk. It's all over the place, but it's all really good. His world building is just great, even in these short stories, and it's the best collection of short stories I've read since Brian Evanson's Collapse of Horses. There are stories that are just really, really, really powerful. And I just can't say enough about Maurice Broaddus as a writer, but this is a really great introduction to his work.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the writer or the book. First time I've heard of it. But, this year has been a good year for collection, I think. And,
yeah, he also had a tour novella called Buffalo Soldiers, which continues in the world of one of the stories in Voice of Martyrs, and I did an interview with him on my blog about Buffalo Soldiers.
That definitely sounds like one I should pick up myself. But, okay, number 8?
Yes. Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. Now, just much like The Force, Sarah doesn't really need me promoting her work. This was a #1 bestseller in England, and it was on the bestseller list here in the United States. They were selling it at Costco, and I'm not even kidding. However, Behind Her Eyes, Sarah is one of my favorite writers in general, and she's kind of moving away from horror into more thriller territory, kind of similar to, this has been called the next Gone Girl. Well, you can't say where it's different from Gone Girl without spoiling it. No matter how many times people tell you the ending of this book is crazy, and I thought the marketing of this book, where they basically said the marketing of this book was WTF that ending, I thought that was crazy. You're like setting yourself up for failure, right? Like, how could this ending be excuse me, how could this ending be as powerful as they're making it out to be? And guess what? It was. The ending was amazing. Behind Her Eyes is a great thriller. Loved it.
Well, one of the things I've noticed this year is that every thriller, especially if the main character is a woman, seem to be compared to Gone Girl.
Yeah, there's a reason why this one is compared to Gone Girl, but it's also better.
Because it was a bestseller.
Right.
But, Final Girls also had that problem. And when you find one that is actually better, it gets your attention.
Yeah.
So number 7, there we go.
Yeah, it's Sip.
Okay, number 7 is?
Sip by Brian Allen Carr, which I just recently read. This is a weird apocalypse novel. It's a surrealist horror post-apocalyptic Western. How does that sound? It is
something I would want to read, yes.
Yes. Sip is high-concept, bizarro horror, and Brian Allen Carr has written that kind of thing before. He had a novel a couple years ago called The Last Horror Novel in the History of the World, and that was very experimental. I mean, there were chapters that were a sentence long and stuff like that. This is more straightforward. It's from a mainstream publisher. When I say more straightforward, I'm saying that in the sense that it's a book about a world that has ended because there is a mass addiction to stealing shadows, because the people who have their shadows stolen from them can no longer sleep, and so these addicts go out trying to basically drink the shadows of animals and then kind of give them to the people who need them, and then they end up processing the dreams of the animals that they, when they finally sleep, it's they dream like the animals that they stole the shadows from. I know that sounds totally bonkers, but it works. It's a great book. Very weird.
Yes, Brian Allen Carr is the one I read. I love the last horror novel in the history of the world. I got that right?
Yeah.
And also another one, Motherfucking Shark, with his wild title, but definitely also a wild book.
Right.
So I would definitely put on my list of one I need to catch up on. Number 6.
Number 6 is The City Awake by Duncan B. Barlow. And I have to confess a little bit of bias, as I've known Duncan for almost 30 years. He's the writer I've known the longest. We know each other from hardcore music, punk rock. He is well known as a guitar player for one of my favorite bands from when I was a teenager, Endpoint. But forget that. Duncan is a amazing writer, and excuse me, this is like a weird, bizarro, noir, surrealist mystery, and it has this really crazy structure. And here's the funny thing, because the chapters are numbered in really unusual ways, I totally misread this novel, where I thought it was doing something completely different from what it was doing. But I liked what I thought it was doing, and so I enjoyed the ride anyways. And I apologize for all the coughing. I'm sorry. I was sick a week ago. The City Awake is just an absolutely crazy noir mystery, and it appears like it's... I don't want to give too much away, but when you start reading it, you think that you're going backwards and forwards in time, because the chapters are numbered and they're not numbered in order, right? So there you'll have a chapter 30 to chapter 18, and then you're back in chapter 30 again. And it's just a really clever misdirection. I loved this book. I was surprised it wasn't higher on my list. But as an old friend of Duncan's, I'm just extremely proud of him in this book. It's great.
The other one I need to look up then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you would love The City Awake.
Yeah. And number 5 is
End of the World Running Club by Adrian J. Walker. This, excuse me, End of the World Running Club is a post-apocalyptic end of the world novel. You'll find a ton of those on my list always. That's set in Scotland mostly, and it's about a guy who is a kind of an absentee father before a series of meteors just blast into the planet. And once there's, basically England gets shelled by these meteors, and the roads are destroyed, the infrastructure's, totally torn up. And while he's out gathering supplies with a couple of other survivors, a group of like half a dozen survivors, his family is rescued by helicopters, and they're taken to southern England. And they're left a note basically saying, there's a ship going to the southern hemisphere in 1 month. on Christmas. Takes place in the beginning of December. You have 1 month to get to us before the boats leave. Your family's going, so you got to get to us. Well, you can't drive a car. You can't, the roads are destroyed. The bikes don't even work because the roads are destroyed. And so they basically decide the only way they can make it is basically to run a marathon a day to get across the post-apocalyptic wasteland in a month. It's awesome. This book is so well written. The tensions, it's just it works on every level. It's the suspense. It's just great storytelling. Really fantastic. I discovered this book because Stephen King sent out a tweet that he was in Toronto for Sleeping Beauty's book tour, and he just picked up this book at the airport in Toronto and said he couldn't put it down while they were traveling. And he was right. This is this is like kind of like Swan Song meets a running novel. I don't know what what a good running novel is, but it's really good. It's really good. It's up there, and it has blurbs from Stephen King and Robert McCammon. So, which, hey, I'm sold. So, it could have easily another year been a number one or higher book, too.
Yeah, from everything you've told me about it before, I was actually surprised it wasn't number one for you.
Yeah, it was. I loved it. In another year, it definitely could have been higher. Excuse me.
Okay, number 4 is
The Forgotten Girl by Rio Ewers. Wow, this is a really, really well-written book. It is basically kind of in the vein of The Firestarter or The Fury. It's almost like a loving tribute to that kind of 80s like psychic person on the run kind of. There was a lot of those novels, right?
Yes.
But what really makes this one work is the villain is great. The structure of the story is awesome. And excuse me. Rio Ewers is a writer who has written a lot of really surrealist horror before this, and I think him kind of trying to write something a little bit more mainstream just worked awesome. It is one of the tightest, best written books. It might be the best written book that I read this year. Now, is it my favorite? Obviously, no, it's number 4. But just on a pure writing and structure level, it is masterful. And so as a writer, I found myself being very jealous of this book for pages and pages. But that's kind of the case with all of the top 5. But yeah, Forgotten Girl, Rio Ewers, very good. If you liked The Firestarter or The Fury, it's very similar to that.
How do you say the name again? Rio Ewers?
Rio Ewers.
Yeah,
Youers.
Yeah, I have heard of him. I have not yet read him. I've heard nothing but good about him. So
yeah, he had a surrealist horror novel a couple years ago called Westlake Soul that is really good as well. But in fact, that might be a better book. Well, no, let me put it this way. I might have liked Westlake Soul better, but Forgotten Girl is just nails, as far as, when you talk about a band playing a song live and you say they played really tight and that, like, wow, they sounded great. Like, this book is tight. It's just, he must have, beyond the fact that he's a really talented writer, he put a lot of energy in the acknowledgments thanking his editor, who I think passed away after they finished this. And you can see the work of a really great editor in this too. And that's not to put Rio down as a writer. I can't say enough good things about this book. So, but you can tell there was like awesome editing involved too.
Okay, number 3 is?
Secrets of the Weird by Chad Straub, and which was your number 9, I believe. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, Secrets of the Weird. Again, bias. Chad is a good friend of mine here in San Diego. But and I've told Chad this, like, I didn't expect, when I met Chad, I did not see a book this good coming out of him. Like, I'll be honest, like, he and I have talked about this. I was expecting a good book, but this book just knocked my socks off. I always describe Secrets of the Weird. I know you talked a lot about the world building, the city building. The characters are extremely vivid in a very unusual environment. And I would say what makes Secrets of the Weird awesome is that it has almost a, like, not early, but like a Magica, Everville era, Clive Barker, like, fantasy feel to it, but punk rock and edgy in a way that Clive Barker never was, right? So there's definitely a Clive Barker kind of fantasy influence. So it's kind of a hard to classify novel because it's dark fantasy more so than horror, but man, it's just the characters and the setting. It's just Secrets of the Weird. I'm just extremely proud of Chad for writing this book, and I can't say enough about how good I think it is.
Okay. All right, number 2. Which I just realized is the same for both of us.
We both have the same number 2. In the Valley of the Sun by Andy Davidson. And In the Valley of the Sun it's funny because I sometimes write reviews for Monster Librarian, and my editor at Monster Librarian sent me this book and said, "You're going to like this one." And she was right. In the Valley of the Sun is going to get a lot of acclaim. Andy Davidson kind of came out of nowhere. I've never heard of him before. But I would agree that this is kind of like Cormac McCarthy, or like a really great Southern Gothic vampire novel. So it's like, I would almost say it's like Near Dark if Cormac McCarthy wrote it, right?
Right.
And but if you're turned off by the idea of a vampire novel, they never really say the word vampire pretty much anywhere in the book. Excuse me. If at all. In the Valley of the Sun does not, it's not a traditional, excuse me, or cheesy vampire novel at all. It's, but it really resets the genre, and I loved it.
Yes. Well, yeah, it was my number 2 too. Like you stated. Not much else to say about it. I already have it. So why don't we move to your number one?
Right. And this one we're going to disagree on because you've read it, but you didn't like it. Excuse me. Number 1 is Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. And I love this novel, obviously. And I've read all 4 of Nick Cutter's books. And this, even though The Troop is everyone's favorite and everybody loves The Troop, to me, Little Heaven was the most interesting novel that he's done. And it has, it feels like Clive Barker at times. It feels like Robert McCammon. And it takes all these interesting things from all these influences and creates what I think is just a perfect distillation of those influences. And I loved how bizarre and weird and out there it felt, but at the same time how comfortable I felt with it as a horror novel, and I found the actual monsters to be weird and creepy, and they worked for me. And it's not often where a, a monster novel where the monster just makes you feel uncomfortable. And like that really tall, like kind of weird, spindly monster that comes walking across. Now I read this very early in the year, so it's been a long time since I read it, but the novel just worked for me. And apparently you did not like it as much as I did, Marvin. Why?
Well, I really hate to say something or talk about all the great novels that's in our best of. I really hate to put it down right now, but that didn't work for me. We talked how well In the Valley of the Sun worked. They crossed between horror and a more Cormac McCarthy ideal. I think Little Heaven is an example of it not working. And I described it as being a cross between Stephen King and Cormac McCarthy, but being weaker Stephen King and weaker Cormac McCarthy. So I hate to say it, but we do really disagree on this one. By the way, I do like Nick Cutter, and my favorite Nick Cutter novel is The Deep. The Troop was good too, but I really like The Deep.
Yeah, I liked all four. The Acolyte is my least favorite because I cannot read that book without seeing the Christian Bale movie Equilibrium in my head. Because I literally saw Christian Bale and the costumes from Equilibrium when I read The Acolyte, just because it felt so much like Equilibrium. But just Little Heaven just worked for me. Anthony and I did a full breakdown right after I finished reading it. So if people want to hear more about like a fresher take with less coughing of me and Anthony Trevino and I talking about Little Heaven right after we both read it, that is available on YouTube. So if you just look Little Heaven audio review up, you can hear kind of a fresher take on it. I just the monsters worked for me. The setting worked for me. I didn't feel the Stephen King. I felt the Robert McCammon and just a little bit of Clive Barker and just the right amount of Clive Barker there. So that's one of the reasons why Little Heaven worked for me. It's interesting because when I talked earlier about seething with jealousy, that's one of the reasons why Little Heaven's my number one, because there were several times where I was reading that book and I just was like, damn, I am jealous of this book. And I thought he just nailed it. But that shows that, not everyone's going to see things the same way. We have a lot of the same books. I think we have 4 of the same books. But this is definitely one that we see differently. I loved Little Heaven. Just some little things. I also read a really great Behold the Void by Philip Fracassi. Was a great short story collection. I know you did a best 2016 read in 2017 on your blog, and for me one of those was Jigsaw Youth by Tiffany Scandal. Mm-hmm. And Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval. I read this year and loved both those. And Long Form Religious Porn by Laura Lee Barr. A great look at Hollywood and all the insanity up there. Really good stuff. So really good year. Do you have anything else you want to say about 2017 in your reading? We're almost at an hour.
Okay, since you mentioned a few, I'll just mention a few. The Laura Barr book, though, I read, and I highly agree with you on that one. Like I said, this was a good year for best single author collections. So I want to mention a couple. My top pick for a single author anthology was Men Without Women by Haruki Murakami, which I think that blew everything else out of the water this year, frankly. Murakami goes into a lot of different directions, but this one has a couple of things that you would call magical realism in it, but mainly it's just a straight story about the ongoing war between men and women and how they both alienate and complement each other. I wasn't on my list because I didn't make room for any more author collections, but Scott Cole's Slices is an incredibly good collection. Probably, aside from the Rookie, the one that I would recommend the most. Somewhat surrealistic, very sensational in a lot of ways, a lot of body horror. I highly recommend it. I think he's one of the upcoming writers at this point. And anything else? Nonfiction. That's for the fun of it, a nonfiction recommendation. Paperback from Hell, which is by Grady Hendrick, which is a look at the horror paperbacks movement that happened in the 70s and 80s. Very funny, lots of really great photographs of the old paperback art, and it is just a delight to read from cover to cover.
Right. I'm going to add one pure sci-fi novel that I really love this year, which was, and an honorable mention is Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill, who is one of the co-writers of the Doctor Strange movie and wrote Sinister. This is a post-apocalyptic, post-human Western robot novel. And there are some really nitty-gritty details in this book that are really cool because since there's no humans involved, there's just certain things like there's no smells, there's no, anything that wouldn't be out of the narrative written by a first-person narrative written by an android. And Sea of Rust, it's really, really good. So it just didn't make my list, but man, it's really good too. So I did want to mention that. But other than that, man, what a great year. I went on some of the older stuff that I read. I did do an eco horror kick, where I read some classics of eco horror and some recent climate change ones, and I think there's some good stuff going on there. I read a really interesting science fiction novel released this year called Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon Ha Lee. I can't say that it was a great sci-fi book, but it was really, really interesting. So I kind of want to just plug that one in there. Another one that would fit in that category, The Stars Are Legion, Entropy in Bloom by Jeremy Robert Johnson. And what an awesome year. Hopefully, people will listen to this and find some books that they want to read. Anything else?
Well, for those who want to see the rest of my recommendations, the other honorable mentions and categories, you can see it at The Novel Pursuit. It is up. So take a look at it. Leave me a note whether you agree or you disagree.
All right, and then I did also do a complete reading list of everything that I read over the year on my blog. So you can see, the whole, gamut, because really, like, I read 45 books from 2017 this year so about half of what I read was from this year. So. But you can always go back and see the reviews, and I'm not going to say what it is, but there is a book that came out this year, horror novel, that if you follow both Marvin and I's blog, there was one horror novel by a major publisher we both really disliked.
I know what it is.
What was it? You can find if you read our blog. Look at the ones that we both read. Maybe you can figure it out. Anyways, Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, and sorry about the coughing, the kitchen, the dogs. I don't pretend to be a professional podcaster. I just thought it was cool to talk about these books with my buddy. So, Marvin, we'll talk soon about another book. Hopefully soon. So,
Sound good.
talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Are you on?